2015, there were 415,656 priests worldwide. But with that many people holding the world's secrets, it's no surprise that every once in a while something slips through the cracks. Welcome back to Most Amazing. I'm Kennedy.
And I'm Emily, and today we are counting down the top 10 dark confessions from priests.
So starting us off at number 10, we have Father Amorth. One day, a woman named Rosa came to visit Father Amorth. She was in her late 30s and was struggling as she believed she was possessed. Father Amorth had completed countless successful exorcisms by this point in his career, and so he was more than happy to help her. Father Amorth believed her affliction stemmed from a curse brought on by her brother's girlfriend, who was a practicing witch and a member of a powerful demonic cult. But during their last session together, things started out as they normally do. Rosa sat down beside the priest before closing her eyes and waiting for the ritual to begin. But all of a sudden, she began to throb. Her whole body was in a terrifying trance, and Father Amorth placed his hand over his heart, starting to feel worried. Suddenly, the thrashing was intensifying and becoming more violent. Even the strength of 5 men could barely hold down the petite woman. Rosa began foaming at the mouth, and her facial features started to become distorted. She continued writhing, seemingly trying to escape the grasp of the men holding her down, and Father knew that some terrifying demon was haunting this woman. Then, without warning, Rosa began shouting in Latin, a language she did not know. "Never!" she screamed into his face in a deep guttural voice. "Don't touch her!" She continued to shout with her demonic voice, still foaming at the mouth like a rabid animal. Father Amorth yelled back to surrender, but the woman turned to him with a sly, haunting grin and screamed, "I am Satan," right in his face. Now, eventually he was able to free the woman of the demon, but he would never forget the day he was eye to eye with Satan himself.
Number 9. Father Jude Bullock, a priest who doesn't believe in God. That doesn't really make sense. A Catholic priest is being investigated by church authorities after complaints from angry churchgoers that he does not believe in God, heaven, or hell. Father Jude Bullock from North London has been ordered to explain his views to the Archbishop of Westminster and the leader of the Catholic Church in England and Wales. The radical clerk, who refuses to wear a dog collar, preaches at St. John the Evangelist Church. He has upset so many churchgoers that some of them have boycotted his masses. He is the first Catholic priest to be publicly identified with the See of Faith group set up to promote the idea of religion as a human creation. Father Bullock says that there's no God out there. His confusing explanations range from God is nothing and God is everything to God is being in itself. He says his prayers are more like meditation and that he has dumped the idea of the soul and questions the concept of the virgin birth. He's defended his controversial views, but I think everyone, myself included, wonders how you can be a priest and not believe in God. Like, he could get any other job. I just don't understand.
Next up at number 8 is Reverend Louis Gigante. It comes as no surprise that the Catholic Church has some very strict rules for members of the clergy. Now, besides the obvious things like don't kill, at the top of the list is probably their vow of celibacy followed by the vow of poverty, which is why it was such a huge deal after Reverend Louis Gigante's death when he revealed he had a 32-year-old son and a fortune of $7 million. Gigante was a well-respected priest in the Bronx from the 60s until 2002, who fought a lot of his career for equitable tenant rights and low-income housing. But as it turns out, he had some secrets in the closet. Gigante's brother was the convicted boss of a large mafia family, and many suspected the Reverend might have had his hand in the ring the whole time. During his brother's trial, a member of the mafia came forward stating that Gigante wasn't just the brother of a member. Oh no. He himself was a part of the family, but it was later recanted and Gigante never confirmed or denied the claims. Still, it became clear that there was a high chance that all of his funding had come from mafia money, no matter his personal involvement. But even more shocking to the Catholic Church than the potential involvement in one of the largest American mafia families was his adult son that he had largely hid from the public eye so that he wouldn't be forced to step down from his priesthood. His son Gino said that while a close inner circle knew about him, that it wasn't public knowledge and was only confessed after his death in 2021.
Number 7. Father Gregory Greiten. The canon law of the Catholic Church requires that clerks observe perfect and perpetual continence for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. For this reason, priests make vows of celibacy at their ordination, thereby agreeing to remain unmarried and abstinent throughout their lives. The 1961 document entitled Careful Selection and Training of Candidates for the States of Perfection and Sacred Orders state that homosexual men should not be ordained. In 2005, the Church clarified that men with deeply rooted homosexual tendencies cannot be ordained. The Vatican followed up in 2008 with a directive to implement psychological screening for candidates for the priesthood. Conditions listed for exclusion from the priesthood include uncertain sexual identity and deep-seated homosexual tendencies. This lesson was engraved into Father Greiten when he was in seminary school, and at 24 he climbed up to his cemetery dorm window and dangled one leg over the edge and said, "I really am gay." Father Greiten, now a priest near Milwaukee, remembered telling himself that for the first time, and that it was like a death sentence. Fewer than about 10 priests in the United States have dared to come out publicly, but gay men probably make up at least 30 to 40% of the American Catholic clergy, according to dozens of estimates from gay priests and researchers. Some priests say the number is closer to 75%. When discussing this, Father Greiten said, "It never really was my shame, it was the Church's shame. They're the ones who should have shame for what they have done to myself and many other LGBT people. All I can say is, preach."
Coming in at number 6 is Father Daniel Petre Corogeanu. I probably butchered that, I'm sorry. But the name of the patient was Irina Cornici, and she had had a hard life. Her father had taken his life when she was young, and then her mother abandoned her at an orphanage where she was abused by the staff her entire life. As an adult, she had a friend who joined a monastery, and she decided that life as a nun would be her saving grace. But after a few months, she began acting strange, and although officially diagnosed with schizophrenia, the priest and many others believed the true issue was demonic possession. Sister Cornici was bound at her ankles and wrists before being locked in her room without food for several days. Next, they chained her to a cross and carried her into the church to anoint her. Her wrists and forehead were anointed with holy oil, and she was gagged with a towel to stop her from screaming as they tried to cast the devil out of her body for the next 3 days. After she was believed to have been freed, they untied the sister, but suddenly she fainted. They called an ambulance as they couldn't find a pulse, but tragically on the way to the hospital, she died. The priest and 5 involved nuns were charged with her killing, and Father Corogeanu was sentenced to 14 years in prison. To this day, he maintains he did not kill the woman, and shockingly, he could actually be right. Although initially, it was said she died of dehydration and starvation, one of the coroners on the team came forward years later saying that it was concluded she actually died from an adrenaline overdose administered by paramedics, and that he had no clue why this wasn't taken into account during trial. So maybe Father was telling the truth this whole time.
Number 5. Sister Josefa Menendez. Yes, she's not a priest, but this story needs to be told. This young Spanish sister, who had a short religious life of great suffering, experienced revelations throughout much her life. More than once, she was taken to hell to witness and feel the suffering firsthand. Sister Josefa was reluctant to write on the subject of hell, and did so only to conform to her Lord's wishes. She wrote about her experiences in her journal. She described hell as the greatest torment due to the soul's inability to love. She wrote, "One of these damned souls cried out, 'This is my torture that I want to love and cannot. There is nothing left in me but hatred and despair. If one of us could so much as make a single act of love, but we cannot, we live on hatred." As mentioned, she went to hell multiple times, but one time she saw the devil. She wrote, "Souls were crying out, and the devil answered, 'Insinuate yourselves by inducing carelessness in them, but keep in the background so that you are not found out. Tempt these others into ambition, to self-interest, to acquiring wealth without working, whether it be lawful or not." That entry was from February 1923. She visited hell many times after that, but didn't report on seeing the devil ever again.
Coming in at number 4 is Father Gerald Robinson. In the year 1980, Father Robinson was the priest for the chapel at Toledo Mercy Hospital. But when one of the chapel's oldest nuns was found brutally killed, Father Robinson became the lead suspect for the crime. Sister Margaret Paul was found with 31 strangely shaped stab wounds all over her body, some of which formed an upside-down cross over her heart, and with a smear of blood across her forehead, symbolizing a mockery of her last rites. When Father Robinson was initially brought in for questioning, his Monsignor interrupted the police interview and escorted him out to leave. There were no other suspects, and the horrifying case went cold for 23 years. But then, in 2003, investigators were sent an anonymous letter from a woman who called herself Survivor Doe. It outlined the corruption she'd experienced under Father Robinson. She said that he, as well as other nuns, routinely abused her during satanic rituals, and that often these rituals involved human sacrifice. She believed Sister Paul was one of these sacrifices. With these new allegations, authorities reopened the case, and with new DA technologies available, they were able to prove the weapon in the nearly 3-decade-old cold case was Father Robinson's letter opener, and convicted him for the crime in 2006.
Number 3. Unnamed Priest. In the Catholic Church, the seal of confession is the absolute duty of priests or anyone who happens to hear a confession to not disclose anything that they learn. But this story was posted online. My grandmother's brother was a Catholic priest, and for the most part he followed his oath to the letter. However, there was a situation where his humanity changed that respect. There was a guy who had confessed to multiple killings and to other people who were still missing. The person who confessed to these crimes was a regular at the church, and my uncle was very torn up about this. He never said anything about the confession with the other priests, but he told me that he prayed about it and he felt that God wanted him to make sure that the other people would be safe. My uncle had a friend he went to school with on the police force, and he privately told his friend of this confession, and his friend kept where he got this information from and started a personal investigation. As it turned out, the man was arrested and convicted. This was the only time my uncle said he went against his oath and the church, and all the way up to his death he never regretted what he did because he believed there are circumstances when a priest should not be bound to his oath. I have to agree to this. If you kill someone or cause serious harm to them and confess it, I feel like that should be reported to protect others.
Coming in at number 2 is Hans Schmidt. Born in Germany in 1881, Schmidt knew early on that he wanted to be a priest, but he was also sort of a weird kid with a dark appetite for blood and gore, routinely caught killing animals and drinking their blood. Spoiler alert, these two passions would collide in a very bad way. By age 25, he was ordained, but after only 4 years serving in Germany, he got into some hot water with higher ups and was forced to relocate to Louisiana. Soon after, he was butting heads with the leaders, and so he moved to Manhattan and began working at St. Boniface Church. It was here that he met the woman who changed everything, Anna Mueller. She was the church's newly hired housekeeper, and shortly after Schmidt's arrival, the two began an affair. After Schmidt says God told him to love her. Schmidt was once again transferred to a different church in Harlem, potentially due to someone learning of the affair, but despite this, he continued his secret relationship with Anna, and the two even had a secret wedding where Schmidt vowed to leave the priesthood for her. But soon after, Anna fell pregnant, and Schmidt knew that everything could be taken from him if word got out he had broken his vow of celibacy. Then, as he tells it, in the midst of an intimate affair with Anna, Schmidt heard God demand he sacrifice her. So one night while she was sleeping, he slit her throat and dismembered her body before taking advantage of the corpse and throwing it into the Hudson River. Then, after he killed her, he went to mass as if nothing had happened. He was eventually tried and sentenced to death, where at first he tried to claim insanity before admitting to everything. To date, he is the first and only priest executed in the United States.
Number 1. Father Jose Maniyangat. He is a priest of St. Augustine, Florida, and he says he died in a traffic accident in 1985 where he was taken by his guardian angel to visit heaven, hell, and purgatory, and came back to life to continue his ministry as a priest. He was struck head-on by a drunk driver, and he met his guardian angel upon death, a figure that was bright, beautiful, and radiant. His angel told him he was going to meet God, but he first wanted to show him hell and purgatory. Hell, he said, was a sea of unquenchable fire, fire with demon-like monsters, lost souls that were dirty, filthy, and ugly. Numbered among the souls were priests and bishops who were not faithful to their calling as shepherds. He also noted a great deal of hatred and infighting that occurred between the eternally condemned. In purgatory, he had the opportunity to speak to the suffering souls. They were all sad, stained, and anxious to go to heaven, and they begged for his prayers. He said heaven shined like the sun and included millions of souls praising God. He met Christ, the Blessed Mother, and Saint Joseph. He said, "Our Lord told me that in my second life he had a great mission for me, that I would come back to life and I would work in a foreign land."
Thanks so much for watching today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video.
And make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below which one you think was the creepiest.
See you next time!